There are moments in relationships where silence speaks louder than words. When someone with avoidant tendencies realizes they might have pushed too far or lost something valuable, a shift happens within them. They may never admit it out loud, but deep inside, they feel the weight of regret. This regret doesn't always show up the way you expect, not with open apologies or clear explanations, but through subtle behaviors, distance followed by sudden closeness, or an energy that feels unsettled. Understanding what it means when an avoidant thinks they've screwed it up can give you clarity, strength, and a completely new perspective on their behavior. When an avoidant reaches the point of thinking they may have screwed it up, it's actually a rare and powerful moment of self-awareness. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, admitting fault or even sensing that they made a mistake does not come naturally. Most of the time, their instinct is to withdraw, to rationalize their choices, and to convince themselves that creating distance or pulling away was justified. So when they begin to suspect they might have gone too far, it means their emotional walls have cracked just enough for them to feel the sting of reality. This self-awareness is rare because it forces them to face something they often try to avoid at all costs: vulnerability. To acknowledge a mistake is to admit that they are not in full control, that their defenses didn't actually protect them the way they thought, and that perhaps they hurt someone they didn't mean to hurt. That realization shakes the very foundation of how they cope with closeness, intimacy, and connection. For them, admitting they may have ruined something is not the same as someone else casually saying, "I messed up." It goes much deeper because it collides with their fear of failure and inadequacy. The avoidant often sees mistakes in relationships as proof that they are not good enough, that they are bound to disappoint, or that closeness will always end badly. So when this awareness dawns on them, it isn't just about the specific situation, it ties into their entire worldview. They suddenly feel exposed, as if their biggest fear of being incapable of sustaining a relationship is staring them right in the face. What makes this moment so unique is that instead of running from the discomfort, at least for a split second, they stop and question themselves. They begin to wonder whether pushing you away, keeping silent, or pulling back emotionally was the wrong move. This doesn't mean they will immediately reach out, apologize, or fix things directly. Their ego and defenses still play a role, often making them hesitate or hide behind silence. But the very fact that they are questioning themselves is significant. It shows that your presence mattered enough to shape their internal narrative, that you disrupted their usual cycle of detachment. In many ways, this is one of the closest moments to true connection you may ever see from them, not because they suddenly know how to love perfectly, but because they are allowing themselves to feel the discomfort of regret. It's a fragile awareness, and while they may not openly share it, it signals that beneath their protective shell, they know the truth they pushed too far, and in doing so, they risk losing something real. When an avoidant thinks they have screwed something up, what they are really wrestling with isn't just the surface level mistake. It's the deeper fear that sits underneath their entire attachment style, the fear of abandonment and rejection. On the outside, it may look like they are distant, unemotional, or even indifferent, but inside they carry a heavy weight of insecurity that tells them relationships are dangerous. Their fear of failure is not about a single argument or misunderstanding, it's about what that conflict represents. To them, every mistake feels like proof that intimacy will always end in loss, that no matter how much they try, they will eventually be left behind or exposed as unworthy. This is why when they panic about screwing it up, it's not a light thought. It's a wave of dread that triggers their deepest fear that they will be abandoned, or that their worst belief about themselves, that they cannot sustain love, will come true. The avoidance mind often plays tricks in these moments. Rather than seeing a mistake as something reparable, they magnify it into a threat to the entire connection. They might replay the situation in their head, not from a place of problem solving, but from a place of self-protection. For instance, if they lashed out or pulled away, they may convince themselves that you are now completely done with them. This fear is less about you and more about their internal narrative. They often anticipate rejection before it happens, so the moment they sense they might have made an error, their mind leaps straight to the possibility of being abandoned. In this way, their panic isn't necessarily about guilt, but about survival. Their nervous system interprets closeness as a risk and mistakes as confirmation of that risk, which intensifies their instinct to retreat. But here's the paradox: even though their instinct is to run, the awareness that they may have messed up also creates a pull toward you. They are caught in a storm of conflicting feelings. On one hand, they are terrified of admitting fault because it makes them feel small and unworthy. On the other hand, they are deeply afraid that their actions will cost them the connection entirely. This is where you see the push-pull dynamic come alive. They may disappear to protect themselves, yet at the same time, they can't escape the gnawing thought that they may have jeopardized something valuable. That tension inside them is exhausting, and it shows you that their fear of failure isn't just about ego. It's about the dread of confirming their deepest insecurities. In truth, when they believe they screwed up, what they are really saying underneath the silence is, "I'm scared of losing you, but I'm even more scared of admitting it." Their panic is less about the mistake itself and more about what that mistake symbolizes in their mind. A potential abandonment, a replay of old wounds, and proof that intimacy is unsafe. This is why understanding their fear of failure is so important. It reveals that even when they act cold or detached, what lies beneath is not indifference but an intense, silent battle with themselves. When an avoidant reaches the stage where they think they have screwed things up, they often become trapped in a tug of war between guilt and defense. On one side, guilt whispers to them that they pushed too far, that they hurt someone who cared, that they may have caused damage that can't be undone. This guilt is powerful because it breaks through their usual layers of detachment, making them feel emotions they normally avoid. Deep down, they may replay moments in their head and recognize the ways they pulled away, shut down, or dismissed your needs. They know on some level that those actions created distance, and that knowledge stirs an uncomfortable heaviness within them. However, this is not the full story. As soon as guilt begins to take hold, their defensive side rises up to silence it. Defense mechanisms are their shield, the strategies they've used for years to avoid vulnerability, and those defenses tell them things like, "You were right to protect yourself. They were asking too much of you," or "If you got too close, you would have been hurt anyway." This push and pull creates inner chaos. The guilt makes them want to reconnect or show some sign of regret, while the defense convinces them that admitting fault would expose them to rejection or loss of control. This is why their behavior often feels contradictory. They may act distant, yet you sense tension beneath the surface. They may withdraw only to circle back in small, indirect ways. That's their guilt seeping out, even as their pride and defenses try to keep it hidden. This inner conflict can make them inconsistent, unpredictable, or confusing to deal with. One moment they seem cold and indifferent, the next they may send subtle signals that they are still thinking about you. It isn't because they don't care, it's because they are wrestling with two opposite forces inside them. For the avoidant, guilt is threatening because it requires them to acknowledge responsibility. To admit wrongdoing means admitting that they could lose someone valuable through their own actions. This level of accountability is terrifying to them because it forces them to confront both their vulnerability and the possibility of rejection. Their defenses, on the other hand, protect them by reframing the story in a way that keeps them in control. They convince themselves that distancing was the right move, that you would have left eventually, or that their independence matters more than connection. These defenses keep them safe in the short term, but they also prevent true repair and healing from taking place. What this internal battle reveals is that when they think they've screwed it up, they are not indifferent at all. Their guilt is proof that they know they crossed a line, while their defenses show how hard it is for them to admit it. The result is a push-pull dynamic that can feel maddening to those on the outside. Understanding this can help you see their actions not as a lack of care, but as a reflection of the war between their conscience and their fear of vulnerability. When an avoidant feels they may have messed things up, their way of showing regret is often very different from what most people expect. Instead of direct apologies, open conversations, or clear actions to repair the damage, they tend to express their feelings in subtle, indirect ways. This doesn't mean they don't feel regret. It just means they are uncomfortable confronting it head on. Apologizing openly would require them to put their guard down, to admit fault, and to risk rejection if their apology isn't received well. That level of exposure feels almost unbearable to them, so they often choose quieter, less vulnerable ways of signaling that they care. These signals may seem small, but when you learn to notice them, they reveal the silent attempts at repair that avoidants are more comfortable making. For example, instead of saying, "I'm sorry," they might suddenly check in on you after a period of silence, asking a casual question that has nothing to do with the conflict. Or they might like your post on social media, respond to a story, or send a simple "hey," as if nothing happened. To an outsider, these gestures may look meaningless, but in reality, they are their way of testing the waters. It's their attempt to reconnect without having to risk full vulnerability. Sometimes they will also show regret through acts of service or small favors, doing something thoughtful or helpful without drawing attention to it. This is because actions feel safer than words. Actions allow them to show care without having to fully expose themselves emotionally. Their silence, too, can hold meaning. While it often feels like avoidance, there are times when their quietness is less about indifference and more about processing their guilt. They may withdraw not to punish you, but because they don't know how to bridge the gap directly. In their mind, reaching out feels risky, yet doing nothing leaves them with an H they can't shake. That's why they sometimes hover on the edges of your life, not fully engaging, but not disappearing either. They're caught between wanting to fix things and being too afraid to admit they want to. It's important to understand that these indirect signals don't always mean they're ready to take accountability or rebuild trust. What they do mean is that your presence and the relationship mattered enough for them to wrestle with their defenses. Their subtle gestures are their way of saying, "I know I hurt you, and I don't want to lose you," even if they can't put it into words. While this may feel frustrating because it lacks clarity, it's also a window into their struggle. Beneath the surface, they are reaching out in the only way they know how, through cautious, quiet attempts that feel safer to them than a full admission of fault. Recognizing these signals helps you see their humanity, even when they can't say the words out loud. When an avoidant reaches the point where they fear they have screwed it up, something subtle but very powerful shifts in the dynamic between you and them. Usually, they operate from a place of control. They create distance, dictate the pace of closeness, and protect themselves by holding the upper hand emotionally. But when the thought creeps in that they may have gone too far, that they might have lost someone valuable, that balance begins to tip. For once, they are no longer the one holding all the power. Their fear of losing you exposes a vulnerability they usually keep hidden. Even if they don't show it outwardly, this awareness gnaws at them internally, reminding them that their actions carry consequences and that the connection they thought they could control might slip away. This shift is significant because avoidants are used to believing that detachment is their strength. They convince themselves that they don't need anyone, that independence keeps them safe, and that they can always walk away without being shaken. But when they realize they may have damaged the bond with you, those beliefs are challenged. They are forced to confront the fact that their choices don't just protect them, they also cost them. The balance of power begins to lean in your favor because they feel, maybe for the first time, that they have something to lose. This awareness is both terrifying and humbling for them because it cracks the illusion of control they hold so tightly. For you, this shift can be revealing. You may start noticing behaviors that suggest they are unsettled by the possibility of losing you. They might linger around in subtle ways, initiate more contact than usual, or seem unusually reactive to signs that you're pulling away. This is because their fear of failure has opened up a rare moment of emotional honesty within them. They can't fully admit it, but they are realizing that their usual strategies of distance and withdrawal are not as foolproof as they thought. In these moments, you get to see them not as untouchable or indifferent, but as human, someone who is just as capable of fear, regret, and longing as anyone else. What makes this dynamic powerful is that it gives you clarity on your role. When they are worried about losing you, it shows that your presence carries weight in their life. It proves that you matter more than their defenses want to admit. But it's also important to recognize that this does not mean you should rush in to soothe them or restore the balance for them. The truth is, when they feel this shift, the healthiest thing you can do is remain grounded in your own worth. Their vulnerability is not a cue for you to fix things. It's a reminder that their actions have consequences and that you have the strength to walk away if needed. In that way, the power dynamic doesn't just change in their mind, it changes for you as well, giving you the upper hand of clarity, self-respect, and choice. The truth you must remember when an avoidant thinks they've screwed it up is that self-blame is not the same as accountability. They may feel guilt, regret, or even panic about losing you, but that inner storm doesn't automatically translate